string lights would also then be running on the photo cell. So the photo cell that runs the Main Street lights and the parking lot lights, we would connect this to that same electric, everything's on the photo cell, they come on at night. You know, programming come on at a certain light level, and then shut off when the light, when the sun comes up. They'd all come on at the same time, they'd all be on that same photo cell. They'd be on a different circuit, so if you had to shut them off, you could shut the parking lot down, you could shut Main Street down, you could shut the alley off, but they're still all on the same photo cell.
So the string lights are permanent. They'll be,
Well, you have an outlet that you're gonna plug into, that outlet is permanent.
yeah, the outlet's permanent, but the plan is to have the string lights up pretty much 24/7.
However, yeah, that's up to you guys, however you wanna have them up.
Yeah.
24/7, you wanna have them up, just,
Yeah, well, if they weren't gonna be up, then I would ask about lighting in that alleyway. You know, what are we gonna do for lighting, and do we have security camera planned for that area also? So those would be, but if they're gonna be permanent, then, or more or less permanent, then they'll take care of that issue. Then and the security camera, we talked to Nathan, you know, about that several weeks ago, and that was gonna be an add-on or something, not only to this area, I think, but to the parking lot. It was a add-on to the whole project, not part of this project, okay? So,
Anything else on this?
There won't be ballards at the street end?
No, because that curb will now go all the way across. We don't expect it.
we didn't show it, but there will be the parking will continue, the parallel parking along the street
Okay.
will continue.
I was just afraid people so used to turning in there that if they're not paying attention, they're all of a sudden on a.
And then hit the curb card.
Or a parked car?
Or a parked car, yeah, I mean, there's gonna be parking there,
Okay.
is the plan.
Yeah, that's a good thought, though. Anything else?
I did pull up the estimate, so the decorative concrete and the additional concrete on the outside of the path is, in total, is $47,000.
Okay.
But you get credit from not putting in the brick pavers in.
And all this.
So again, when you put in all your pluses and all your minuses, it's just under 43,000. And again, we priced this version, which is just all standard concrete with brick paver. That'll be our next, but I'm sure it'll be less than that.
Yep. Anything else? So, council, what's your opinion on this? Go ahead.
looks good to me.
It's good.
All right. Very good. Thank you. And now on to the town hall meeting. We've got a sort of an agenda set up here. We're going to break this up into certain sections. First, we're going to start off with the background of the recent discussions. Then we're going to talk about some data from the police department. Then we're going to have a public participation area where we're going to solicit comments from the public, discuss with the public, with you guys. And then once that's done, the council itself will have discussion, and that will be just for council to discuss. And then we'll figure out where we're going to go from there. Good? So as far as the background, does anyone have a summary? I don't have a summary with me. I think everybody kind of knows where we are right now. We've got three basic options to deal with with our noise ordinance. We can either leave the noise ordinance as it is. We can completely scrap it, or we can modify it. So that's basically the three options that we have. I know there's been some discussion one way or other. We've talked about noise levels at different places. We've looked at different municipalities and different areas and how they address the noise ordinances. We've got a lot of good input from the public, both business owners and residents and other concerned citizens. With that, does any other background that you guys feel might be pertinent to the discussion? Chief McKee.
Does everybody have the chart in front of them?
I'm gonna pass that around.
This, actually, we had Officer Austin go out and take some decibel readings. We've ordered a real nice decibel meter from Hilliard Police Department. So it's probably one of the nicest ones you can get, and I'm pretty sure it's accurate. I'll wait till you guys have them all. I know it's kind of confusing too, because I had to have him explain it to me, because I think it was the first time he did a spreadsheet. So if you look at the first column, this is the location that he actually did the reading from. We're gonna skip the first two, go down to 119 West Second, where it says previous 90 caller, and a code 90 in law enforcement is a noise complaint. So if you look at that and go over the times before any music coming, and we did this around, we basically did it around where we're getting the complaints from, basically, from the granary and the bands and stuff when they're playing. So if you look at that, before any music played, the low decibel reading was 45 and the high was 65. Once the music started playing, and it shows where he was actually standing on the street with the decibel meter, from 2100 to 2122, which that's military time. If you guys need me to tell you what time that is, I will. You can still see that the meter readings were basically either the same or lower or close to what it was when the music was playing, without the music. And without the music, it basically you're just listening to everyday noise. It could be traffic, it could be construction work, it could be whatever's going on at that time, wherever he was standing. So if you go down to the rest of the columns, you can just compare the decibel meter readings to when the music was playing and when the music wasn't playing. The largest decibel meeting was, of course, at the band. And the band that was playing that night is probably going to be the loudest band that the granary probably has during the year, right, Tim? You think so? I mean, the Economics was playing, they're a pretty loud band. So I don't think there's going to be any band that's going to be louder than what that was there that night. So if you look at those readings, basically, I mean, without the music and with the music, I mean, they're pretty close. Again, that doesn't mean the music's playing a constant an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever they're playing. But the other noise that, without the music there, is just everyday noise that you're just going to hear throughout the whole day. Does everybody understand?
Yeah, now I guess the thing, now is this, these lows and highs, these are steady decibel measurements or pulse or intermittent decibel measure? I mean, okay, if you like a bang, car goes by, your decibel level's gonna go up.
Right, it was just between those times there that you're looking at. And those were the low readings and the high at that time.
All right.
You know, you could have a semi go by and it'd be even louder than that.
I know when we were doing our up.
Again, that's what I said, is, you know, when you're listening to music steady.
Okay. You guys have any questions for the chief?
I didn't feel like there was a need to go, you know, I could have went over Carriage Stage or somewhere like that, but we weren't getting any complaints from those areas. We went to the areas that we were getting the most complaints from.
All right, thank you.
What were the first two?
I'm not for sure why he didn't put that in there, right? Because that was over in Darby Field, unless there was just no readings or something, I'm not sure.
Maybe that's just like ambient, what would look like, sound like normal.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Or maybe he just couldn't even hear the music over there at that time, so he didn't get the readings.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, anybody else? I guess, do you have anything else, chief?
That's all I have at this time.
Okay, thank you for doing that. Thank your officer for taking care of that.
I'd like to personally thank the Hilliard Police Department letting us use their meter also.
Can we send them Official, thank you, thanks. All right, public participation time. What?
Did we do like a sign in or anything?
No, I figured we just basically let people put their hands up. I mean, it's just like school. And honestly, we all know what the problem is. So, I mean, we want to try to avoid rehashing the problem. What we're here to discuss tonight are solutions. So I think we're all interested in hearing some solutions from you guys. And the thing to keep in mind here is while there's a single issue that has brought this to the fore, this is not something, we need to try to make this a more of a blanket policy, something that's going to fix any other things in the future. We're not looking to just fix one problem right now. So that's something to keep in mind. Anyone have, and if I call you, please just stand up, introduce yourself, and we'll.
John?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes when groups do this kind of thing, they start with a person on one side of the issue, and then the next person to talk is on the other side, and they keep changing like that. I don't know if we want to do that.
Okay,
Just thought I'd
we're not
mention it.
looking at one side of the issue or the other. We're looking at
Okay.
solutions.
All right, so there's no
we're not here to
sides.
argue. We're not here to debate. We're here to look for solutions. Yes, sir.
So, my name is Andy Lear. I live over on West First. Yeah, for 3 years, so still kind of. I just want to start by defining the problem, or at least how I understand the problem. The problem is not a Tim Dawson. The problem is not a Andy Lear. It's not a West First. It's an acoustics problem, right? And to your point about solving it for down the road, I understand, and I've heard, I guess, from multiple people that there are thoughts about putting another grandstand of sorts in the back, in that parking lot, maybe? Is that a thing, maybe? Maybe it's not, I don't know. But let's say it was. Let's say it's been talked about. So, again, that would not be a Tim Dawson problem, that would not be an Andy Lear or West First problem, that would be just the fact that you have projected music within proximity to people's houses. I think what we have going on right now in the current ordinance is pretty good in terms of the fact that it addresses a couple of things. One, is it a city-sanctioned event? At which case, yes, the city, on behalf of all the residents, has agreed to that being an okay thing. Point in case, anything that happens in the park is usually city-sanctioned, usually. I'm sure there's people that go outside of those rules. And then also, things like Rock the Clock, that's absolutely city-sanctioned. So that's awesome. And please understand that this is not me being on either side. I'm trying to walk the line as well as I can. Tim Dawson playing music on a Friday or Saturday night should absolutely be allowed. Like, there's no question about that. The idea of invigorating the downtown and bringing more business here, absolutely, all for it. What might become even more of an issue is we get what would be considered like a battle of bands, right? We get another, whether it's Lee's Sports Bar, whether somebody comes and buys another property there, and next thing you know, it's kind of all hell breaks loose. So I guess for me, the acoustics problem really comes in, and what really travels is the bass. So you can look at these decibel readings and say they're not too far from each other, which is absolutely true. And even at the back patio next to the freezer for Pioneer, 81 to 92, you don't want to sustain that for a long time. I mean, that's your choice. You're there, right? You're there partaking in the good music, and it is good music. Don't get me wrong. Like, I've come down and hung out. There is only so many times though I do want to hear Taking Home Country Road for the weekend. So the verses might be nice. And not to suck up too much time, but it really is an acoustics problem. So I'm not standing here on either side of it so much as I'm definitely trying to come to it from a more mechanical standpoint. Some of the observations I had being down there were that basically the back wall being metal kind of acts as baffle. And then Tim was nice enough to with the sound guy that he has when they're running it. And one of the problems that they run into, just as a data point, is that the musicians control their own volume on their personal amplification units, their personal guitar interface. So if you've got this dude that's playing bass and he's getting really, really into it, and so is the rest of the band, I mean, it's not uncommon for musicians to just crank the heck out of their amps so they can keep up with each other. And it's excitement. It really is. You're in the moment. You're turning that thing up to 11, and you're trying to do your best to keep up. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I don't know that it's ask the bass player to turn down, because I don't think that's necessarily going to work. But I just kind of wanted to start this with, it's an issue of acoustics.
Right.
That's what it comes down to in this case, and finding out how businesses can improve their acoustical situation, either before they go in, or unfortunately in Tim's case, once he's in, what can be done to kind of modify that. That's kind of the thing. Honestly, when you're getting what I'm calling the shotgun effect off the back of that building and off the back of the stage, it's heading, direction is that? Northwest? Is that right? It's heading northwest. So we've had discussions on the Facebook group where somebody on the other side of the Flatiron building, the tall building, so nicely redecorated, like, they don't get it as much. And even the one gentleman who lives up above, like, I don't know how, like, he closes his door and that thing is like rock solid in terms of like it's better for him than it is for us. I don't know, that's weird, I don't know how that works. I'll stop there, just wanted to define that the issue is acoustics and not business owner versus locals. We're just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and that's what, I mean, we're trying to figure out the village's solution to how do we address noise issues as a village. What sort of enforcement issues can we take? What sort of standards can we set? So,
Mr. Rucker, can I
Yes.
chime
Yes,
while I'm
please.
thinking about it? And you said an acoustic issue. So as things are getting approved and, you see, okay, I'm taking this as an example with the metal wall, what are there, and Shannon, do you know if Columbus has any like certain standards, building standards for some of these, other venues, thank you, that to put in place to say, okay, if you're gonna put a stage here or do this, what can we check off and say this is not a good angle?
Yeah, Columbus zoning code only addresses, outdoor amphitheaters, which have tiered seating. This doesn't have any tiered seating, so it wouldn't be considered an outdoor amphitheater. Columbus does have a noise ordinance as well. I think they do identify some decibels. They also have a process where businesses can get noise permits if they know they're going to be exceeding whatever that established level is for an event. And then similar to Plain City, any city-sponsored event is exempt from the noise ordinance permit requirements.
So as we talk about like being a village-wide, so for example, like steam threshers would apply for like a noise permit, because we know that, I know Hilliard, that's why we kind of looked
and
at
that would
Hilliard,
be,
because
that
they
would
had
almost
that
fall
system.
under a city sanctioned
Yeah, that's like a city center.
event.
Okay.
So again, that would sort of cover that.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's in the current.
Right.
okay.
Yeah, it's already covered basically.
Yeah.
So that's something that as we go forward with a solution, we need to make sure we don't, accidentally get rid of that.
Mhm.
Yes, Ms. Perkins.
Leslie Perkins. I live at 510 Gray Street. Most of you have been to my house, but if you haven't, Gray Street runs off West Main Street down by the old Jan and Tony's Pizza. Our house, I've never called and complained, but we do hear it at our house. During the week, it's very distant, it's very faint, just up, but it's constant. It does get annoying, but if that's his business, if that's what it takes, we understand. But on the weekends, It is very loud. We have a front deck, we have a back deck. After dinner, we like to go out, have a cup of coffee, a drink, and we go out and sit down, and there it is. It's very loud. We could sing along. When somebody's speaking, we almost can make out exactly everything they say. And again, I understand. And I just wanted to, I'm not really here to complain. We've never called the police on it. It's just there, it's annoying. But I did want to speak because it's not so much a decimal thing, it's a distance thing. And for it to reach us all the way down at the west end of town, I can only imagine what it must be like for the houses between us and there. So take that into consideration. I don't know what can be done with that.
Well, that's what we're trying to figure, that's what
I
we're
don't
trying
know.
to figure
I'm not a
out. I
sound
mean,
person.
it's a real
Yeah.
conundrum.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah, I'm not a sound person, so I don't know if it needs a higher wall or more
Well,
enclosure. But I
and again,
wanted you to know
fix
that it does
issue, yeah.
travel that far.
Right.
So,
And while, yeah, and again, the current issue is one thing that we need to fix. We're trying to figure out what to do going forward as
Right.
well. So we want something that's going to be equitable and agreeable to as many
Right.
people as possible without hurting people's property values or
Right.
other things.
and I understand that, it is one thing, it is what it is.
Right.
But just sometimes we'd like to sit out there and look quiet. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Does anyone have any thoughts on potential solutions?
I think you need an engineer for that.
We've got,
I have some, I'm Tim Dotson. I have a lot of things that have come to mind and I'm working on just so that everyone knows that it's not something that I'm ignoring or I am thinking, I don't care that people are complaining, because I do, and I want everyone to be happy. I want it to be a win-win situation. And so I have contacted 2 people, and I'm sure they're in the same situation that every other business in this world is in right now, is they have no help. And I have not been successful in contacting either Kinetics. I did get a phone call back, but by the time I called him back, he still hasn't returned that phone call. And then the other one was the one that I sent Mayor Carney, never called me back at all. And I plan on calling them back. The problem is now we've reached the point where we're past outdoor entertainment. And so we're back inside, and it's definitely not a problem now. So how are we going to duplicate what's happening in the summer and the winter time? I don't know how we're going to do that. But I do know that there are solutions out there. I had talked to a few people, and one of the encouraging things that I got from the first gentleman that I did talk to at Kinetics, and he was putting me in touch with his person that was going to come out, was that if we can lower the decibel rating by 5 decibels, it actually will feel as if it's 50% less loud to people. And so he was just talking to me from his desk and not sending his guy out, but he just said that there are many possibilities that we can do to help reduce some decibels there. And I think that would, of course, solve the issue, at least for the most part. But we're sitting here talking about something that is going to be in the spring or summer before we can get it implemented. And that is waiting for him to come back to me and tell me this is what we can do, this is how much money it's going to cost, and then for me to implement it. And then is it really going to be something that people are going to say, yeah, that helped a lot? Or and I think the only way we're going to be able to do that is with a decibel meter. And I'm probably here to talk about, I don't think that's the answer, just because when I look at other communities, there's only one community and next to us that's even near us that has a decibel rating, and that's Hilliard. Marysville doesn't, Dublin doesn't, Powell doesn't, West Jeff doesn't, London doesn't. And so when you look at that, and then there's a couple articles in the Dispatch back in 2012 that talk about that when you go down this road, that be very careful because you're going to have to be defending it from the police department. It's going to have to go to court and defend this, and it's going to be a problem. So, and then also in 2012, Powell put an article out on the paper. It was their village administrator said that we basically are putting it back into the business owner's responsibility to just be a good neighbor and hope that we don't ever have to go down that road and set decibel ratings and do those things. But, you know, I don't know, Dale, if you've had the opportunity to look at the decibel ratings versus Hilliard's noise ordinance, was anything over Hilliard's noise ordinance levels that would have been a violation?
I didn't even look at that.
Okay.
But I will say this, you mentioned Hilliard and Powell. I know Powell's going through the same issue right now because the chief reached out and wanted to know what our results were going to be, or what our results were, because they're going through the same issue right now.
In Marysville.
Hilliard, when we went to pick up the decibel meter, they had to find it. Because they said even though that's been an order, they've never used it.
And that's
And they don't get
interesting,
complaints.
because Hilliard is probably the closest to our situation with their entertainment district being close to a residential. I mean, you've got Avery Addition right behind Main Street there, and you got the Crooked Can and Odie's and all that, and they back right up to those houses.
Right, and I guess basically when that went into effect, or when that started, the same as us, I mean, it was something new. They got some complaints and stuff, but they said after a while, they didn't get any more complaints. And it was like, I don't know if they lived with it or if the business owners actually turned the music down or what, but they said that, you know, since they put the decibel meter ordinance in or whatever, they haven't even used the decibel meter. Like I say, they had to find it when we asked for it.
Well, one of the things that did help me when I did find out that Hilliard had a decibel rating, their rule is that 50 feet from the source of the noise, you can't be above 90 decibels. And so I didn't even know that even, and I promise you at the beginning of the summer, we were above 90. And so when I bring my sound guy in and he has his rating right there, I tell him, I said, we do not go above 90. And that in and of itself, I know that Andy had mentioned that things have gotten better. That's one of the things that caused it to get better, is that we didn't go above 90 decibels any longer. And it's really funny, I know Leslie mentioned, you know, the distance is so true, but there's many articles on weather and how that affects wind and everything else that affects the sound and how far it travels. And I don't know how we're going to change that side of things, but I do know that the time limits also are something that I would like for you to consider, because I know that all of the other municipalities, except I have, there's Marysville, there's no time restrictions. I know they're going through some things in Marysville because of the walking brewery that's down there now, and there was a lot of complaints, but I do know that their Uptown Friday nights, Terry Emery was very adamant about the fact that he just went around. I know that the residents are going to hear their noise out of their Nashville type restaurant that's going to be right in the downtown area. But the time restrictions in Marysville, there is none. Dublin has midnight as theirs. West Jeff, no time restriction. London, no time restriction. Powell, no time restriction. I'm not sure. I couldn't find. Didn't have time to check Hilliard's, but I would ask that during the week we have ours is at 9 p.m. and that's really early. It's not even dark yet. And so I would ask that if it is at all possible, we talked about, I know one of the council members mentioned 0 decibels, and that's like that is a complete opposite, but I would like for it to be 10 p.m. during the week and midnight if at all possible. But if not, I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that there are other communities that have midnight as their sound because of that. And you talked about entertainment district. I know that there's been several council members that want to talk about having an entertainment district downtown where people walk around with alcohol. And I think that that is a great idea to designate an area that is an entertainment area, that you know it is in a downtown area and it is mixed use in that area, because we do have residents that are close by. But at least when you move into that area, you know that's what it is. It's an entertainment area, and it is an opportunity for people to come. And that's one of the things I really wanted to share with you guys is the number of people that are coming to Plain City now. Just June through August, 37,229 guests at the Granary that have come to Plain City. The sales aren't really important, but it's revenue that's coming into the village, and local taxes paid in just those 3 months was over $3,000 to the school district, and the number of employees I have during June, July, and August, 101 employees. 101 people are employed because of the Granary and Pioneer Pizza. So there are a lot of benefits. Of course, there is that noise that is lingering out there, but I want to know how many noise complaints have you had, Dale?
Mike, I gave those to, I can't remember, what was it, 11, 12?
Oh, I think it was more than that, like more like 15.
15 somewhere,
And
yeah,
there's
it's
people who
15.
don't like to bother the police with that.
Yeah.
So there's probably many more.
But there are 15. How many actual residents?
Complaints?
Yeah. Did you?
I think we're getting a little bit
Yeah.
of far afield here from what we're here to discuss tonight. I mean,
Mr. Dawson, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying about the companies not being able to come out just yet, and I know this is, yes, this year we're not gonna be able to obviously do anything, but I think it's for the future planning and next year that if, so we avoid the same scenario next summer and to make sure that we are just proactive. And so I don't think that, having them come out and do the research now is gonna be lost on it and everything.
I would think any good sound company would have their own sound source that they could use to test acoustics with. They wouldn't need to have a band there. That way, that they would have a more consistent base that they would be able to use. But all right, thank you. So, anyone else have anything?
I mean, just to throw it out there, I'm open to help test. If it's a matter of, the problem is cost being incurred where there's no revenue coming back to the business owner is the issue here. But
Right.
essentially, if you were to have a sound guy that he hires come out and do a normal setup, the only thing I will say, so there were a couple of things that happened when I talked to the sound guy. He was gracious enough to let me bend his ear for way too long. But that was the first thing. And then the second thing he did, which was nice, he actually did lower the entire PA system for like a handful of seconds while the band continued to play on. And he made it very evident that the sound person he had was pulling out some of those lower frequencies. I think what it really comes down to is finding a way to work with the bands that come in. Initially, it would be nice to have some sort of phone tag where, with a band there, you can do some initial tests with somebody at the soundboard and somebody walking. What's right there, Smith? No, Smith.
Smith Place.
Smith Place, and giving feedback and seeing if there's anything that can be done, because you can pick out on even the basic sound system, you can pick out frequencies, keep them out, not affect the music greatly, the quality of the music, and potentially reduce what's traveling, unfortunately, the whole way down to, was it Gray Street?
Yes.
Yeah, so the question I have for you is like, you're hearing the vocals, you're hearing some of the crisp stuff that's bouncing off the Flatiron building. But I would wager to say that some of the things that the people slightly closer are hearing are the bass frequencies. So when I'm in the farthest room of my house on West First, inside, what I'm getting is, right? Yeah, but I guess my point was, some tests could be done in the interim. Obviously, it's not gonna be ideal, you don't wanna hire a band just to play for no reason. But I'd be up for some sort of testing. The only other thing that I'll say, Tim, your sound guy's speaker stacks, there's a lot of them on each side. Now, I don't know what the other bands bring, but on each side, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12s or 15s. I don't know that you couldn't get away with one of those on each side, honestly. And that's not a critique on the sound guy. He made the comment, with more speakers, you have to travel less. I understood that to be like in a church setting where you have speakers strewn throughout the sanctuary, like distanced. Now you can do delay stuff, but you could theoretically have a house system where everything can run at a lower decibel rating and be more spread out throughout the system, or I'm sorry, throughout your area. But we're still going to run into musicians wanting to just crank the hell out of there. So there's tests that can be done in the interim.
So, and I appreciate that Mr. Dawson and you guys are trying to address that specific issue, because right now that is the specific issue. Like I said, the bigger picture is we're trying to figure out, where do we go from here as a village with the noise ordinance? Do we modify the noise ordinance? Do we leave the noise ordinance the way it is? I mean, that's what we're trying to come. I mean, I don't know that modifying the noise ordinance is going to change anything, to be honest with you. Yes.
I say keep it as it is. I mean, this is just my opinion. I mean, at
All right.
11 o'clock, I mean, but maybe he doesn't have to have a band every, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
You have Tuesday, don't you? Yes.
No, well, usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay, what plays Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
We don't usually have anyone playing on Tuesday or Wednesday
Okay.
outside
Is
in
there
the
any-
summer.
Do you guys have like recorded music you play through? Cause I've heard that on weekends too, it seems like it's been through this
like-
system.
And during breaks of the bands, we have a music, like just general music from Sonos Radio that plays outside on the patio.
I've heard it on the weekends during the day.
I was just thinking, maybe Thursday night, people have to work the next day, that maybe just cut it out on Thursday night and maybe just do Friday and Saturday.
I have a question.
I don't know. It's
Yes.
just my opinion.
And I guess, as I'm thinking about this, I hear my mother's voice. But why does it have to be so loud? It's like,
Get
off
my lawn.
I hear the bands, I'm thinking, if we can hear it on our deck so well, what must it be like down there? How do people talk? How do they carry on a conversation? Can that be reined in a little bit? I think that would save a lot of things if you could just turn it down just a little bit.
I think that's
That did
maybe
help a
something.
lot when we did know what that was from earlier. It helped tremendously. And we adhered to it then.
Okay.
So, like I said, at the beginning, I honestly didn't have anything to go by.
Uh-huh.
I didn't, I went, my
Conversations
guy just
impossible
did
at
what he
night.
thought was right.
It's
Well,
either
if you'd like
lost
to
time
give me
with
your
that.
card next spring, if we hear it on a Saturday night, I'll call you. Tim, come on down the house. See what you think of it.
Great.
Actually, that sounds like a good idea, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
I know when they had the high school prom, or the homecoming at the high school.
Yeah.
I mean, I live right by basically Alcott, so, I mean, I don't know how far that is down to high school, that's probably what, about a mile-ish, maybe a little close to that distance. But, I mean, inside the house, we couldn't hear anything, but if we were in our backyard and no cars were going by, I mean, I was like, oh, there's a Taylor Swift song, and, I mean, I could name the music that was going
Yeah.
out.
But that's
I don't know
different
what it
because
was,
that's just
but.
a one-time event and you think, okay.
Right.
But
But
for
it's
us,
still-
it's every,
I can hear
you know,
I'm
every
just saying,
Saturday night,
Every weekend, every other
All right.
weekend or home game.
I just know one Saturday night, we had a
Mr.
nice
Daly.
dinner, and I, oh, okay.
Has the village had any complaints during steam pressures when they're doing tractor pull.
Well, no,
Because
because you
that's
know
just-
that's a temporary thing.
No, but the thing is, the noise ordinance doesn't, if whatever you write would have to apply to that as well, because even if it's a temporary
It
situation.
does, we've
it's still
already
that
addressed,
event.
actually, that was already mentioned, that that's a village sanctioned event, so it's
The steam pressure just?
it's exempt, it would be exempted under the noise ordinance.
I mean,
Village
you
sponsored
could
event, the
theoretically get
department.
any activity
Right.
approved by, the city to, like, if I wanted to yell through a loudspeaker for 3 hours on a Saturday, if you guys approve it, I can do that. Now.
I don't think that would last.
Right,
Well, that's free speech.
well, yeah, that gets tricky.
No, but yeah, I don't know, well, I don't think you get, a village sanctioning for that, to go stand on the corner of the loud for 3 hours,
Maybe 10.
but no, and again,
No, but like, what about let's think about that, because you're right, Jim, is that it does need to be across the board, like a baseball game that's going on every single Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever it may be, the noise level or the pool or anything like, I'm thinking lots of things that make noise.
Well, yeah, it's just not, what I'm getting at, it's not just your business, whatever we do, whatever you guys decide on this noise ordinance has to be across everybody, and you just can't pick and choose, it's this person, and this person, or this event and that event. So you gotta be careful in how you guys are gonna reword this.
And so far, John, this has been exactly targeted at the granary, because we haven't, did you pull up any of noise complaints from Lee's over the last year, 2 years? No, no one, and Ron isn't here, and I didn't even ask him to come to let him know, but, you know, he has bands on his back porch on bike nights for sure, and some on the weekends outside, and there's residents right there too. And so it's something that isn't just Tim Dawson and the Granary.
right, no, and that's why we're trying, that's why I'm wanting this.
That's the only data you're looking at, John, right now. That's the only
data I
data that you just got and you looked at.
But I have mentioned in the past that the original ordinance was put together because of the complaints at Lee's at that time. I've mentioned that, because that's why they changed it. The original ordinance was to allow those hours for the bands to play downtown. Right, I mean,
Yeah.
from 9 to
Right.
11, because it was 9 o'clock across the board, all for weekends, everybody. Well, the council came back and changed it because they felt like the bands downtown or at Lee's or whatever were allowed to play outside, so the music was loud at that time. Ron actually built the house and stuff behind the place. So, I mean, we don't get those complaints that we used to because it's his house. So,
I always wondered about that.
yes, I mean, and I'm sure these people will sell if you wanna go buy all the houses around there and stuff. So.
No,
But no, I just wanted to throw that in there,
No,
because that's where the
that's
original complaints were coming from, was from
So,
another.
so I appreciate that Mr. Dawson is trying to fix the issue that he's having at his place. But again, this is something that we do need to look at across the board, and again, the current ordinance, it seems to be working okay for the most part when it's enforced. If it can be, I don't know, can it be enforced?
It can be enforced. The issue that we're having, and I've said this all along, is that I know why the ordinance was put in place.
Right.
I know it was a businesses. Now, I know how it reads, all right, and I know it says it can be all day, every day, but the problem is, most of the time we get to somebody's house, they don't want to file a complaint and go to court and charge them. They just want us to have them turn it down. So then it becomes on the officer's back, should they charge them for the violation? But most of the time, without the victim, you don't have a crime, right? So it falls back on the officer to determine, is it unreasonable, is it too noise at that time? To make an actual charge, because the complainant, most of the time, they don't want to do the court, they don't want to sign their name on the charges and go to court and take the time to do that stuff. They just want the music turned down, and they want it kept down. So when you look at this ordinance that we have now, that's what we need to focus on.
Is it
And that was what we were here to focus on,
It's,
was looking at this
yeah,
ordinance.
there's certain times and stuff in the ordinance that we have right now, and it on the weekends it's to 11 o'clock.
I know, but I mean, like, does anyone complain more like on a Thursday night than on, you know, like, say, like on a Friday or Saturday night? I mean, cause again.
When you say
people
complain, are
work
you
on
talking about
Friday.
the complaints at the granary?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, most of the time it's the weekend, because that's when the bands are playing.
well, he said he has a.
Yeah, there's several of those incident reports that I gave Michael that we were actually the complaint, because it wasn't when a band was playing, there was just noise coming from the back patio for some certain reason that we had to go down and take care of. There wasn't even a band there that night. So,
Just if I can offer a suggestion, I mean, to kind of get a little direction, I think at least as a fundamental issue is a decision on, or at least discussion on whether you want to have decibel meter or reasonable person standard. Because if you're going to reasonable person standard, it's going to be across the board in every district, and it's going to be, reasonable person is going to be under the same similar circumstances the way it's going to be determined. So 11 o'clock at night on a Friday is going to be different than 11 o'clock on a Wednesday as a reasonable person, because it's under those actual circumstances. If it's a decibel meter issue and you guys feel that the decibel meter is probably the way to go, then you get into subcategories of districts, distances, and times. And if you use the decibel meter, you can further compartmentalize how you're going to enforce it and how you're going to regulate it. If you're going reasonable person standard, it's just kind of wide open, and then and again, and neither one of them are wrong. I mean, and again, I think Tim was right. I mean, when we were coming up with all of this, and I think even going back to the original, when we drafted this thing back in 2016 or 17, you looked around, Hilliard's the only one that has a decibel rating that's anywhere in central Ohio that I saw. If you look at Gahanna or Powell or Worthington or, anywhere at Dublin, none of those have any decibel meter readings. So again, it just depends on, kind of where you feel. Do you feel comfortable that you can live with a reasonable person standard? And then maybe there's some tweaks we can make to the legislation that will help the police and help people. Or do we go with the decibel reading? And if we go with the decibel reading, then we can actually compartmentalize between zoning district and times and levels and things of that nature. So I kind of see there's two categories that you guys have to kind of decide on first, and then from there figure out how you want to go about it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I would just say that, I don't know that a decibel reading is the right answer. I tend to second Tim with the fact that, if there's only one that's doing it and they're having to dig in the back of their supply closet for it, it sounds like it's really not an issue or not gonna help. It does come down to us as neighbors working together to kind of figure out as a team what's not even bearable. It shouldn't have to be bearable. It should be what's appropriate, I guess. And again, the fact that Tim's already reached out to multiple people, he's got his own sound guy working on some weekends, that's helping. For the sake, and again, we're not trying to solve the granary, but if there was some sort of way the council, or when a business is setting up, they're able to work with either the council or a group appointed by the council to assess and kind of look at this, let's say ahead of time before we put in a stage there in the parking lot there, or before another business opens somewhere else and puts another stage, or even a back patio deck where they're gonna host, an acoustic band that decides to turn up to 11. Like, it has to be kind of a community effort to try to solve it. I really don't think the decibel meter is gonna help. Because honestly, it wouldn't help my case. Like, the officer coming over to my house, he's gonna hear 60 to 70, but that's not the point. The point is, I'm getting bumping in up until 11 at night. And to be fair, for Tim, he's pretty good about killing it right at 11, so like, he's following the ordinance there. It's just unclear. The problem is our current ordinance is somewhat unclear, where it says for any unnecessary or unreasonable length of time that would cause an inconvenience or annoyance to a person of ordinary sensibilities. I mean, a lot of that's somewhat vague and probably more in the favor of the resident, which, you know, without residents, you don't have business, without business, you don't have people coming into the city spending money, and the whole place goes to hell, right? So it's gotta be, I'm just gonna voice my opinion that I think we work with what we've got. And that we try to make modifications, or we try to work with the business owners, to tweak what they're trying to do so that it, you know, makes it reasonable for people.
And just for your knowledge, as far as the ordinary sensibilities language, that's the reasonable person standard. And that was drawn back at the time when we were first doing this. I had to make sure, like, okay, am I getting something? And that was specifically, that's the language that was approved by the Supreme Court, specifically on being constitutional language that was affirmed, and that's why we use that for the reasonable person standard.
Any other comments from the public?
I think just to wrap up, kind of like what you're saying, Mr. Lear, and then to Mr. Dawson, I think that's a great idea, because yes, we're here to talk about our noise ordinance and which path we're going to take, but I think at the root of this, we have to help solve you know, some of the current issues. And Mr. Dawson, I think that we have a lot of musicians here in our town that would be willing to help, and I know you don't want to have too many opinions, but I think in this case, like, to have a wrap up a little bit and kind of give some guidance into the spring might help.
It could be an issue that planning and zoning might want to look at as well. It'd be, again, because Tim unfortunately is kind of the focus, because he's the guy that's doing it and the most prominently. I mean, you're the business that's doing it. But if other people come in and they have bands or whatever, we may want to have something in our zoning code or our planning and zoning code to say, okay, going forward, as part of the process of getting zoning approval for whatever, if you were going to have an outdoor entertainment business that's going to have live music or whatever, here are some additional steps that we want to check boxes on to make sure that we have that, you know, those boxes checked and that we have that under control. Or at least it's pre-planning, so that the person coming in, you know, Tim may not have, you know, when you put the metal on the side of the Pioneer Pizza, you probably didn't expect that was going to be an issue that it might reflect and carry and reverberate. And again, I'm not a sound engineer, I don't know if that's actually what's happening or not, but at least if somebody's planning to do that construction, then you can have somebody, at least that being an issue to be considered before the zoning approval.
So you don't think a strong ordinance, like similar to what we have as a noise ordinance, would be sufficient to just cover the issue?
No, I think it does. I mean,
he's talking about, I think what he's talking about.
I'm talking about planning and zoning.
Is
right.
Nipping the issue before
I'm
it
just
becomes an
asking if
issue.
it really needs to be in the zoning code,
Well,
if we have a good ordinance.
Well, my point was that if you address the issue before they come in, then you can already predetermine whether or not there is going to be something that you think perhaps would be an unreasonable amount of sound or an acoustical issue that may develop, and you can address it before it happens. And then you don't get into having to interpret.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to move from the public comment section into unless someone else has anything else. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your input. You're welcome to hang around and listen to us discuss.
Let's chit chat.
So, on into the discussion portion. Who would like to
I can go first, it's fine. So, I actually have written down almost exactly what Paul had just mentioned. Some sort of sound study, if you're gonna have music emanating or sound emanating from the thing into planning and zoning. So I'm a big proponent of that. It'll probably surprise no one in this room that I spent a decent amount of time walking around that area and knocking on doors. The general consensus, and you're hearing from Mr. Lear, I forget his name, the guy that's sitting next to me, talking to him while his kid was outside, and basically there was a mixed bag. Some people are like, I like it. Some people are like, the music in the park is louder, and it's probably to Ms. Perkins' point, like, depending on which street is open, or like which thing, like which direction things are coming from. People in Second were like, I don't really hear the greenery, but I hear the park. So, the overarching issue from like, again, just talking to like random people in that area was definitely the bass. They were all like, the actual sound, kind of interesting. I actually didn't go to Gray. It is interesting that it goes all the way to Gray with like sound. but like the bass is an issue there. The people actually like nearby, they were all like, yeah, the only thing that really bothers me at all is like the bass, cause like if I go outside, yeah, I might hear it, but if I'm in my house, I don't hear it except for these bass frequencies. So to me, if you add decibel ratings, it doesn't even solve the problem of what the people are actually experiencing. Like, so I apologize, Chief, because it does make his life easier from an enforcement, but if no one's using it, it doesn't really make sense. It's like putting a solution in place that doesn't solve the actual issue. So, I would be very against adding any decibel ratings. I
Just
think.
for the record though.
I mean, this argues.
Oh, you are too? Never mind, she's not.
This argues against.
Yes, yeah, exactly. This is exactly.
Just because of that.
This really is exactly what everyone was saying to me as I walked around. They're like, it's not the sound. They're like, but inside my house, sometimes like, you know, the windows are rattling or whatever from the bass. I can't write that into a noise ordinance. So to me, I think you go the route of, I think someone wrote like back into the business to be a good neighbor, them working together. This is not something that I think we can do more good than harm by adjusting our current policy. I think hold on a second. Realistically, I am way more open to leaving it exactly where it is. I'm actually maybe open to moving it to midnight on the weekends, but I don't think we need to maybe go down that path today. I think we solved one problem before we open up a different can. But to me, I'm gonna be a big proponent of leave it alone, encourage being a good neighbor, and I'm definitely pro fixing this at the front end and doing sound studies in like a planning and zoning type setting. Because outside of that, I think this reasonable person thing, and it's not working for everyone, but I think it's generally working. So that would be my comment is leave it alone.
I just wonder if anybody on council really is in favor of a decibel standard for this. Because I'm thinking we're really not in favor of that, so it kind of defaults to a reasonable person standard. Which puts the burden on, I think Chief complained about that before, that puts the burden on the officer to determine the way our current ordinance is written with the reasonable standard 50 feet away. If you can hear it, it's a violation. So that puts the burden on the police officer to see if he hears it, which doesn't seem like an unreasonable burden to me, but you know, maybe we should talk about that.
Sherry, do you have any?
I agree with Mike, I just leave it alone.
Yeah, I would just leave it alone too. I mean, there's no need to change. The data pretty much shows us it's not gonna matter as far as decibels.
Sounds.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the decibel meter is the way to go. There'd be having all kinds of issues with making sure it's calibrated correctly and.
Right.
I think we've kind of reached the.
There wasn't a solution offered that I thought.
Yeah, I mean,
was reasonable, so
it's gonna be a soup sandwich for a while, there's no doubt about it.
Well, John, Mr. Rucker, I think we're stuck with determining what's a violation and what isn't. Then if it's a reasonable person standard, that reasonable person has to stand someplace and see if he hears whatever is being complained about. So if he does, it's a violation. If he doesn't, then it's okay. And I mean, maybe I'm not seeing this right.
A reasonable circumstance.
Well, and again, the language that we have is that it is likely to cause inconvenience or annoyance to persons of ordinary sensibilities. So if I stand 50 feet away from something and I can hear it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to annoy or cause
that could be different from person
cause
to
an
person.
inconvenience. So it is going to change. And again, it's not like this is the way the law is in so many areas. The reasonable person standard is the way it is. And generally that means when you get in front of a jury, if you have to try the case in front of a jury, that's your reasonable group of people, and they are going to come to a consensus among themselves of whether they think something was unreasonable.
And I guess, so what we're saying let's be reasonable people, right? What we're saying is, if we leave this alone, I don't think there's been a single violation. So what we're saying is, if we leave this alone, we are comfortable with what is going on, and we're saying, turn the base down, but that's really up to the business and the neighborhood working together. It's not really a council thing. So let's just be clear, like, if we leave this, there's big complaints, but there hasn't been a violation cited, so, and I'm of the thought that that is correct, and we just say,
Yeah,
this is reasonable, we understand it's a problem, but,
I think it can be worked out.
yeah, and it's not really our purview of, we built the noise ordinance to be a reasonable person, be reasonable people, so I'm cool with leaving it, and I'm cool with
Well,
that.
Mr. Chair, the complaints are more on the order of, I can't sit on my front porch on Friday and Saturday night
Okay.
and have a discussion. So it's more than just a base issue, it's a volume issue.
Okay, and there is nothing that we can do to this ordinance that's going to fix that. I
Well-
think that's what we've been here discussing all night.
Well, the complaints, Mr. Rucker, have come in a period of time when people sit out on their porch.
Correct.
And that would be before 9 o'clock and before 11 o'clock. So, begging your pardon, we could do something about the ordinance in terms of getting rid of the time issue in the ordinance would be one way to start with that.
Get rid of what time issue?
We're only gonna allow bands after 9.
This is
To
24.
only in 2 a.m.
Honestly, the way I read this ordinance is a 24-hour ordinance anyway. There is no exemption for any time periods for being able to annoy people on their property. Okay, that at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening, people want to sit on their porch and they hear the music and it's loud and they get annoyed. Okay, you got half of the ordinance satisfied. Now, all you have to do is have a police officer come and say, oh yes, I hear that. And it's the complainant that's annoyed. The police officer doesn't have to be annoyed by it.
Right.
It's the person who lives on the property who's annoyed, and he's telling you he's annoyed. So now you have both parts of the ordinance in place. So it sounds like a violation. The only thing that's keeping it from violation is the presumed time exemption here.
Is there no written time exemption?
There's a time exemption, and I will say
So it's
that-
not presumed, it's an actual time.
Well,
Yeah,
not
but
everyone
it's-
agrees with that interpretation.
Yeah, I will tell you that in reading this and going back over it and reading it dozens of times over and over, I'm not thrilled with the language of the time that we have in here, because in the end, we're still applying the reasonable person standard, and so the time, again, the time was put in there to kind of emphasize kind of an adjustment and train and thought of, okay, if it's a Friday night, at 11 o'clock, it's okay, but after that, it's, we're going to switch, the reasonable person standard is going to adjust a little bit. Could have been written better, and I would agree that there are things that you could do. You could take out the time altogether that's in this, and it's not going to change the ordinance substantively, because the reasonable person standard is dependent on the time, the circumstances that are presented. So if it's 2 a.m. and the bass is thumping, a reasonable person is going to say, under those circumstances, that's unreasonable to me, or 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. But at 9 p.m., a reasonable person is going to say, yeah, I can hear the bass, but it's Friday night, no big deal. So I think
At 11 p.m., a reasonable person is going to be.
So.
Yeah, again,
At midnight, a reasonable person
Right.
might be.
Yeah. So the
That's fine
question is,
with
and
me.
I think what Mr. Reed is saying is that if we put a time element in there, if we were to take out what we have in here and instead put a time element in that at whatever time, at 2 a.m., if an officer gets called out and you can hear music coming from the establishment at 2 a.m., that is a per se violation, it's done.
But I think back to Michael's point, I mean, I have had neighbors have music blasting at 1:30 in the morning where I could call the police and complain because they're violating that ordinance. But instead I'm going outside and saying, you woke me up, it's 1:30, can you turn it down?
Right.
And I think that's his point is, can we work something out without having to get into the ordinance issue?
So, Ms. Giammo, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If that same neighbor was every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night
It
doing
is.
exactly that,
It is.
and you're okay with that?
I'm not okay with it.
Okay,
And I
so-
continue to tell them.
But unfortunately, with the interpretation of the ordinance being used, you have, at 8 o'clock at night, you have nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I think needs to be fixed. This doesn't all just apply to businesses downtown. This applies to your neighbor's son in the garage who's got his amps turned up all the way. If he can do that at 8 o'clock, you have no recourse except to listen. Or if it's a person across the street. I could drive my car, or I could rent a office space in the downtown area across Main Street from the Granary. I could open up my window and I could put a speaker out there, and I could put a big amplifier there, and I could turn it up way up. And nobody could do anything about it under this ordinance. And I could aim that right at the patio
Calling the
in front of
police
the
and
Granary.
having them come
Pardon me?
out.
No, I wouldn't do that, and no reasonable person would do that, but a nasty person might. And they would be perfectly legal and allowed to do such a thing. And that's the defect in the way we've been interpreting this ordinance, and that's the whole heart of all of the residents' complaints here. It's not the granary, it's the noise on their front porch that's the problem. So Mr. Dawson can do, I don't really care necessarily if I were one of those residents what he does. He can play his music at 90 dB as long as it doesn't reach my front porch. That's what I care about. That's my property. I have a right to enjoy the use of my property. This is hundreds of years old civil law. I have a right to that enjoyment of my property without interference from any outside source. So that's where I am with this.
So you
and
shouldn't
that's-
be able to hear
But it is,
anything.
well, I
about
get
it.
that, but what about your
Right.
neighbor's kids? Sometimes
Pardon
my
me?
neighbor's kids
Yeah, your
annoy the
neighbor's
crap
kids
out
get
of
out.
me,
They're
and
loud
I am
out in the
trying to
yard
sit
at
on
8
my
o'clock.
porch, and it's
Should
2
we call,
p.m.
are they in violation then?
You know what, the ordinance is written kind of well or good in that respect. They have exemptions for lawnmowers. And if you're gonna start complaining about kids playing, that's normal everyday activity.
Well, right, but how do you determine
Well, it sounds like
what's
a band is normal everyday activity
and what's
anymore.
not?
Well, having an amphitheater downtown is not a normal everyday kind of an activity for most neighborhoods.
I think what Chief had said earlier was their issue is that, you go into the homeowner or the resident and they don't want to press charges, so that, does that tie their hands a little bit to it of carrying out the noise ordinance?
Well, and I think typically, I mean, Chief can answer this, but I mean, typically in a residential area, if you were to call the police out, they'd come out, they knock on the door and say, hey, it's 1:30, can you turn it down a little bit? And they'll turn it down, and then that's the end of it.
Let's also not pretend like this is a normal residential area, right? This is a business district backing up to a residential area that we are doing streetscapes and parking lots, and we're investing in this area. We want this to be a business district. So let's not pretend like this is next door to Michiano. Like this is a business area, so it's not gonna be the same one for one here, right? Like, and I know that it's not easy to communicate and say, but they're gonna have to work together just like you and your neighbor, but when this isn't a subdivision. This is I always call it that brackish area, that these things are coming together. And I've been talking with the masses. I'm not talking about the Yelp reviews. I'm not talking the 0 stars and 5 stars. The masses are like, it's pretty much okay. The base bothers me. Again, I'm not gonna solve that here. And I'm a little bit, this time thing's interesting to me, and I like to get Mr. Lafayette's, I actually get why we're doing the time. We're trying to say, up until this moment, we're a little more lenient. I'd almost double down on that and be like, clean up the right wording, or I don't know what Mr. Lafayette thinks about this, but I'd almost clean up that wording and be like, we're very specifically saying at 11 o'clock, it better be turned down. I don't like that it's vague. I don't know how you clean that up, I'm not a lawyer, but again, I'd almost double down on that part. Or, because I think if you remove it, then you're kind of like removing that idea of like, hey, we think on the weekend in this business, like in this area, well, and basically anywhere, it's a little different than when people have to wake up and go to work tomorrow morning on a Tuesday night. So, I don't know, if I would change it at all, that's what I would do. I would like clean up that part. And I don't know, Mr. Lafayette, what do you think about cleaning up the time?
I think there's a way to craft it in a way that would, because really, the way the language is in there right now, and again, I'm not thrilled with it when I go back and read it over and over again. I think the purpose of it was to express an intent.
Yeah.
An intent that the reasonableness changes a little bit on the circumstance, and we're trying to emphasize that.
Yeah.
And so I think we could put some language in there that would emphasize that, the reasonableness is in the reasonable and ordinary sensibilities are determined based upon the time, place, and manner, something along those lines, so that we're going to take those factors into consideration. Friday night at 10 p.m. is not going to be the same as Sunday morning at 8. We're going to look at the time, place, and manner a little bit. So I think
And that was the original intent.
I think that was the intent, and the more I read it, the more I don't like it.
So I would
And
just,
I wrote
I
it.
guess, my story would clean up part of it.
Would you, so maybe clean up that time language then?
That's what I'm a proponent of.
Would that be something that could be done by Monday, or
Sure.
would that be something that we would need to wait a little bit?
No, I can do it Monday. It's just one paragraph that's just going to be cleaned up, and I can do that.
And is there a way to look at any zoning codes that has like this sound, like a sound study built in, so that we can have that into
A sound.
Planning,
Like a-
is a sound study a thing? I think,
I don't know.
I wrote a sound study too.
I did
so
too.
don't
Well,
know if
so-
it's a thing.
Sound
is that what you mentioned?
An audio impact study?
Yeah, we do traffic studies,
How do
right?
you do an audio impact study on
I like
something
that
that
term.
isn't in existence?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Again, I was just
But
gonna,
you do, hold on, they do that with traffic though, right? They say, hey, I'm gonna be predictive and say, if this is happening, this is gonna have this much traffic, and that needs a traffic light, or that needs a stop sign, that needs things. So it's gotta be a thing.
I got to assume that
It's
somebody out
gotta be
there
a
knows
thing.
that, like, if we have a 12-foot wall placed at this distance and these
Sure.
configurations, that they can do either a simulation or a study. There's some way
Yeah.
that they can determine roughly how that sound is going to carry, et cetera. Again, it's not going to be perfect or precise or exact, but you're going to know, at least be identified, we've got a huge problem here.
And
I'm getting the nod
yeah,
back there, so.
and I think,
Could be.
can we all agree to, let Mr. Leary, I think he might know what this answer is, but we're good to go.
Yes,
Public,
yes, please.
Mr. Leary, is this type of thing, like a sound impact study a thing, and how would that work? You know
Well,
what I
I'm
mean?
sure it is, but even on like a real basic level, you take a PA system out and you put it where the presumed patio is gonna be, and you crank it the heck up, and you say, okay, I want 90 decibels about 10 to 15 feet from it, that's what a band's gonna produce. I mean, that's, right, you're getting 80, or 70 to 90 was what was on the,
It's 90 within 50 feet of the source of the.
Yeah. So you basically produce that to the best of your ability. I mean, that's not hard. It's what happens when you insert other potentially new structures, which you would have to do the estimation for. You would say, okay, we're gonna put a 10-foot wall back here, and the speakers are for the most part gonna hit that. And that's not gonna be an issue for people behind the wall. Now, it could potentially be an issue for the people over here. Oh, but the business is gonna be here, okay.
So,
Right.
okay.
It's possible.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. My only problem with this, I guess, because in theory, I like it, but I also, before we do something like that, we need to know, like, we're not just like adding another layer of like red tape that's like impossible for a business to like do, right? Like, they're gonna be like I'm trying not to make life harder on people, like, so before we do that, maybe we think through that a little bit more, maybe. I don't know, because I'm just trying to think through how, like, what if, like, I don't want a business to have to, like, build a wall just to, like,
Right.
satisfy us.
Right.
You know?
I was thinking more of like a computer modeling. I'm sure that
Yeah,
there's
there's-
ways to do it, but again, I don't know. I'm not into it, and we can research that and
maybe
see
not
some stuff out there.
Yeah, something to just think about.
I was thinking perhaps there could be some type of good neighbor agreement drafted between the business owner, I don't know who they would draft it with. In Columbus, when a good neighbor agreement is done, it's usually between the applicant and like whatever area commission or neighborhood group that the site lies within. Twin City doesn't have different neighborhood groups.
Right.
But it could be something just so that if there is an issue, the residents know who to contact, you know, whether it's Tim directly or the sound guy or whoever, so that, and that could be tracked too. I don't know, like maybe there's,
You wouldn't put that in the noise ordinance, you'd put that in like planning and zoning.
yeah, and you know, I know Columbus had talked about this, when a lot of outside entertainment patios started popping up. One solution that our zoning office had was to maybe require a special permit for the patios, but city council didn't decide to go that direction. But it is, like, it could be a conditional use, perhaps, that would have to go before the Board of Zoning, that I would think it would be more suitable for that than just being part of the zoning code. It would be part of like the BZA, like having certain conditions that have to be met in order to
get a permit or.
So I don't know.
That might not be a bad I mean, you just don't know what future development looks like.
Right.
And like you said, I think Mr. Lear said battle of the bands. We don't want to have to compete over the other, but it's just, that's a future thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I was suggesting, again, planning and zoning, maybe something in the code, but I understand what you're saying. The only hiccup that I see there, a speed bump that I see there is, let's say somebody renovates a building or constructs something on their property, and at first they don't anticipate having the ban, then later on they want to come back and have a permit. Now because of the dimensions and the size and the structure itself, it creates a problem. Now they're prohibited from doing it. So I don't know. Again, it's all something to think about, but.
We could also build into the current noise ordinance a permit process. We don't currently have that, so that if you know you're gonna have an event that's not village sanctioned, that's going to exceed certain times or what have you. I see like parades are on there, but I don't see like anything that would get a permit to close streets, for example. Like maybe that would be something that could qualify, or there's just a separate.
I think there's a lot of stuff that's exempted. School activities are exempted. Village, anything that's authorized by the village is exempted, which would be every event that stages something in the park. You know, those are reasonable exemptions, and people are used to that. I don't see that that's going to be an issue. If there's needs to be more in there, I think they could be easily added. But just doing a blanket, if it's authorized and permitted, you know, given a permit by the village to have an event, then it's, you know, that the noise comes with it.
It doesn't say that currently. It says,
okay.
it says that a village-sponsored event in a village park.
Right.
That's not a street, you know?
Right.
That's not, and a current parade permit, well, that's probably a different permit than somebody who's closing off a street, so. So I think it could just be expanded a little bit too, and yeah, I don't know if we wanna have a way to have a noise permit process.
Okay, so what's going to happen with this 50 feet business? Because that's at the heart of this noise ordinance. And it's all about how far away people are from the noise, how much they're going to hear from the source. 90 dBs, you're going to hear that a long way away. So I just have to ask the question, what are we going to do with that? And right now, at 50 feet away, if you can hear it, it's a violation. Okay, so where does that go?
Well,
Does it stay the same?
I just want to say it's conjunctive. It's plainly audible and likely to cause an inconvenience. So you have to.
Well, sure.
Part A has to
But
be
that's in
audible.
the eye of the beholder, is it not?
But that's the whole standard.
The reasonable person beholder.
Yes,
Okay.
the reasonable person standard, that's what it is.
Beholder, and that's gonna be anybody that complains about it. I mean, you're gonna have to prove they're not reasonable.
Well, and let's put it this way, and I think this is kind of the crux of it. If a police officer, and again, I think they give deference for the most part and they try to work things out, but if something is just plainly unreasonable, I think the officer's gonna write the ticket. And then if they go down and if it gets criminally charged, then it's gonna be criminally charged and there'll be an explanation or whatever, and it'll get tried that way through a criminal charge. So I think that, again, it's not gonna be up to the complaining party, it's not gonna be up to the business owner or whoever's making the noise. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be up to the police officer to say, I either agree with you that that is unreasonable, or I don't. And if I think it's unreasonable, I'm gonna go over.
in the past, because one officer might think it's unreasonable, and then the next officer thinks.
Well,
that-
but you mentioned before filing charges, that if the person is not gonna wanna file charges, how does that play into this picture? I didn't, because he's saying that if the officer thinks it's unreasonable, he can just write a ticket without somebody filing a complaint. Is that right?
But if they don't wanna go to court, basically the officer don't have a witness, right?
I don't
Other
know.
than himself saying that I think it's unreasonable, I don't think it's unreasonable.
Okay.
It's his discretion to write the citation at that time.
Okay.
So if he doesn't write the citation at that time, then who's, I mean, I can't make an officer write a citation.
Right. No, I'm just
Nobody
saying,
can
does he
make an
have to
officer
have
write
a
citation.
complainant agree to file charges, or he can do it on his own if he thinks it's.
He can do it on his own, but that's the discretion of the officer, but it's a lot harder to convict on it if you don't have a complaining party. If you don't have the victim showing up to court, it's kinda hard to get
I
a
thought that
conviction.
was prima facie evidence in those hours, if you don't need anything additional except the citation that the officer said, because he does this on traffic tickets, right? He saw the guys, or he
It's
measured
his
the
discretion to write the citation.
Right.
Right.
So, okay, maybe it's a.
You're not having somebody complain about the speeder, the officer's the one catching the speeder.
Yeah, okay, right, yeah, he's doing it on his own, so, I still am wondering about the 50 feet, how that comes into
We're
play
gonna leave
here.
the language in. I think we already decided.
So
that
it's 50 feet
that's
away,
gonna
which
stay.
would put me
That
on.
language is gonna stay, and Paul's gonna clean up.
I just wanna make sure I understand
the
this
time language, yes.
correctly.
So 50 feet away would be, somebody could be in violation on the patio. I mean, if you're
No,
on the
50
patio,
feet
you're
away
50
from the
feet from the
property, okay?
It says from the source of the noise.
From the source of the noise.
From the noise, the source of the noise.
I don't know how many people would
Let's
interpret it that
change
way,
that to
because
property
he's
line.
allowed to have that noise on his own property. But that was certainly on the other side of Main Street, or on the other side of Chillicothe, 50 feet away, it's loud. So I just want to make sure we fully understand what the 50 feet means in this context.
The 50 feet means that if you're within 50 feet of it and you find it, if it's a reasonable person would say being 50 feet away, I think that's unreasonable. And again, under the circumstances, if I'm standing in the granary in front of the band and the band's playing and I'm 50 feet away, is it unreasonable to expect that it's gonna be really loud? No. So that's where the two things are together. If you're 50 feet away.
Yeah, but this says plainly audible. It doesn't say anything about annoying or anything. It says plainly audible.
Plainly audible and, it says plainly audible and likely to cause inconvenience.
Okay, this.
And once again, that's
We've
subjective.
been around and around and around on this.
Okay, we'll look
this
at
point.
what he comes up with, but, you know, it's an important distance to 50 feet, and it's gonna restrict and really I'm asking this question is benefiting the source of the noise, if you will, because that's a huge constraint on the ability of the source to amp up. 50 feet is not very far. So he's gonna be, the source noise is gonna be restricted to 40 amps or something like that, or 40 dBs, or something like
What I
that.
can do is
in order to avoid the ordinance.
I can circulate some different versions for everybody to
Yeah,
take a look
okay.
at, and we'll just do 3 or 4 different versions, everybody can look at them and see what you feel comfortable with.
Paul, F1 does cover the events permitted by the village, so I don't know that we need anything else. I missed that when I was reading the list of the exemptions, so.
Okay.
All right. So you'll we'll get those circulated out to us all.
Mhm.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, thanks, guys, thanks for coming out, everybody. Appreciate your input, really do.
Noise ordinances are a pain in the ass.
They're a huge pain.